Rocco is a guy whose basilisk was the reason that Elon met Grimes. So they both searched for the same joke, which was Rocco Code's basilisk.
I did not realize the basilisk had introduced those two, but okay, interesting.
It does strange things, that basilisk.
Yeah.
So whatever. Okay, so let's get a little bit technical. So the idea, first idea is a causal trade, right? And this is like kind of the hard one, right? So that two agents can cooperate over a gap, right? It could
This
be a
is
time
something
gap
that
or a space gap.
This is something that Rocco posted on Reddit or something?
Less wrong back in the day. I'm talking like 10 years
Less wrong
ago.
back in the day.
So there's two. The idea of a causal trade, I don't think comes from Rocco. The basilisk does. A causal trade comes from somewhere in game theory. But the point is, if two agents understand each other sufficiently, they can do what the other wants on the condition that the other agent will also do what they want without any conversation exchanging hands, right? Like exchanging sort of going across each other, right? So and this is kind of often thought in terms of like the speed of light. So if you've got like a very large distances, you don't even want to send any message at all. So you kind of like, well, what would they do if they were cooperating with me? I should do that, et cetera, et cetera. And if they're not doing, this is the important part, if they're not doing the thing that I want them to be doing, I would want them to be doing based on my fair calculation, whatever. When I get there, I'll punish them. Right. So you kind of, you've got two people, like you got prisoner's dilemma, but there is no communication. And at some point the walls are lifted. Right. So you say, well, I don't want to defect, because if I do defect, yes, I get my benefit, but then the other person is going to know. And I should affect my behavior based on that. Okay. So we take all of that. And again, I appreciate this can get complicated. But we take that idea. And we say, well, maybe the AI is already kind of posing that dilemma to us, right? So maybe it's already saying that if you help me come into existence, I will reward you, because, hey, that's cooperation, right, with it. But if you don't, and I'm just going to leave it at that, that's the basilisk, right? That's the scary thought of, if it is going to happen, then it is in, at the benefit of people today to make it come into existence, because us not doing that or not bringing it to existence earlier will be seen as a defection.
So let me
just even articulate it like we let more people die than there should have been, or whatever.
So the idea is you could have the emergence of cooperation without communication over a distance, based on the fact that when there is no distance, the person on the other side of the communication will behave in a way that you can predict. And that can be done in time as well. The AGI that does not exist, how will it feel about what I am doing relative to bringing it into existence at the point that it does arrive, right? And so I better start working now, before there is AGI, to make the AGI happy when it arrives with my behavior, so that it doesn't hurt me, right?
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's it's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say like there's some aspect.
No, good enough. All I for the relevance to the current story is not the details of Rocco's basilisk. What happened after Rocco posted this on Less Wrong? What year would that have been, roughly?
It would have been early 2010s. I don't know if it was 2010 or 2011 or 2012, that period.
So what happened?
Yudkowsky lost his mind. He went at him really hard, in ways that I'd never seen. Like, I mean, it was like all caps, you idiot, or you kind of let the cat out of the bag, basically, right? By spreading this knowledge, you have now made it a thing. Even if that deal was not extended, well, now people know about it, so they can't even claim they didn't know.
So therefore
that might, you making it more likely to happen.
Near certain, as I understood I only learned about this long after it had happened, but that the idea that Rocco even posting this hypothetical basically condemned people to a future of some kind of hell if they did not start doing their best to figure out what the AGI would want and doing its bidding in a present before the AGI arrived. Is that right?
I don't know the certainty that he expressed, but he definitely was sure enough to cause a big scene, let's say, right, and to sort of turn a lot of people off. So he must have thought it was
wasn't
wasn't
the post purged and people
I
forbidden
don't
to
know.
go looking for it or something?
I think it was. Yeah, I don't know if Rocco was on board with that or whatever. I mean, Rocco is on good terms with Yudkowsky now, so I don't know how all of that stuff played out. But yeah, it was sort of banned and purged for a while, or what? I mean, probably still is. I don't know. It's in 100 places on the internet, right? It's not
Right.
it's not hard to find.
Look, it doesn't matter because I'm not really interested in the basilisk problem per se. What I'm interested in is that it is a early sign of a kind of inappropriate thinking and inappropriate interaction surrounding a problem that is quite parallel to the one that we are currently facing. In other words, I believe that in evaluating Yudkowsky's view on the certainty of our doom and therefore what the rational behavior is, that this is actually an indicator of how this person behaves in what they perceive to be an emergency relative to something that they can calculate that others don't necessarily see in the same terms, right? I think the point is this is our test case, and it tells us an awful lot, right? It tells us, I think, that this is a person who is so wrapped up in their own thought process, so lacking in what I have heard you and others call epistemic humility, that they panic. They reach a conclusion about which they are very certain, and they publicly panic over the fact that something dire has occurred that basically anyone who doesn't see it is a fool. Right?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm still manning his position, I would say he would say that like he wanted to create a social, negative around doing things of that nature. Now, again, that I don't think that was exactly how it played out. It was a lot more, foaming at the mouth and a lot less, the next person who does this kind of thing. But again, it all leads down an authoritarian path, right? Because what do you want to do? You want to control information, and the other thing I want to say, I'm trying to think how to say it because I unfortunately I don't have a lot of the details, but I think it's important, is that on the basis of such ideas, people in those circles have had pretty dramatic psychological events, right? So this is not
what?
Events. I don't know if it's psychotic breaks or stuff like that, but like these are people who, as they say for themselves, they take ideas seriously, right? And hey, I admire that. But there is a reason why most people don't, because most ideas are not worth taking seriously. There's sort of whateverness baked inside of us. And if you're able to disable enough of those safeguards and like really believe that something's going to happen, things that can be really powerful really powerful, but not in kind of the way you were intending.
Yeah. Okay. So the question then, I guess, I don't mean to be so focused on Yudkowsky. In fact, I wouldn't be focused on him at all if he weren't, in my opinion, pulling a fast one in which he's saying, look, here's a scenario. Either you get it, in which case you'll agree with me about what needs to happen, or you don't get it, in which case you're not smart enough to get it. So basically, it's a cheat that results in everybody who gets it knows that what we have to do next, and the people who don't get it are the obstacle. It's, forgive me for being traumatized over being told 1,000 times that we had a pandemic of the unvaccinated, right? It's like that kind of trick where you create this idea that anybody who doesn't see the world as you do is the obstacle to all of our well-being. And
I mean, it's kind of your predicament, really.
What?
It's kind of your predicament.
Yeah, exactly. But nonetheless, I don't like. This is not how I would expect somebody who actually did spot an emergency that other people didn't see. This is not how I would expect them to behave, right?
I would say, especially if you had 20 years to prepare for that moment.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I
Nothing
would
about
I would
this is a
expect something a
surprise.
little bit more polished at the very least, like something more thought out than,
Yeah,
hey,
not even polished. I would
yeah.
be suspect of polish, but I would say something more persuasive and less manipulative.
Anyway. By the way, for people who might be watching this and saying, what are the alternatives? I do want to point people to Paul Cristiano, who is definitely not unconcerned. I think his probability that something goes wrong is in the I don't know, 20 to 40 range. Let's call it, maybe even a little bit above some days. But I think sub 50 is important. I think 50% is a very important
Yeah,
threshold.
it's a very important tipping point.
And he has made actual contributions to the modern state of AI. And he has written, Yudkowsky has cited him as somebody who gets it and has had long debates with Yudkowsky or something along those lines. And Paul Cristiano has written, very eloquent. He's not like me. He's very, measured in his tone and stuff. But he has said, look, I feel Yudkowsky hand waves a lot in some of his arguments. I feel like he's overly certain. I feel like he doesn't have full understanding of the cutting edge of the field, and he downplays certain things that he shouldn't, et cetera, et cetera. Which again is not to knock anybody, except if you are shouting fire in a crowd, which by the way is not a free speech violation these days, mind you.
Right.
But just to say, but I support basically. Look, I support Eliezer's right to say all of that stuff, but I think the correct response is to what we're doing, which is to speak the opposing view. That is, no, we're not that doomed unless we make it. Unless we actually take actions that will concentrate all of the risk in one place and just offer a juicy soft target to an AI that maybe is not that capable.
Oh,
But
I have a terrible idea.
we can put it on an island.
No, that's a truly terrible idea. I have
That did come up.
a terrible interpretation of the present. I would like to get you. I mean, as long as we're over here in this territory.
Go for it.
Eliezer Yudkowsky believes in Rocco's basilisk. You got it? You got it?
Yeah, I mean, hey, I can't rule it out.
So let me spell that out for others. I'm glad you got it immediately. You tell me if you in fact had what I'm about to just say.
Yeah.
If Eliezer Yudkowsky believes in Rocco's basilisk, and he also believes the AGI era is about to dawn, and therefore the AGI is coming and is going to look at Eliezer Yudkowsky and say, well, what have you done for me? Eliezer Yudkowsky had better get the world to create a single point of failure that the AGI can capture, right? That is the way Eliezer is going to survive the AI apocalypse, is by being the AI's right-hand man, and he is now doing its bidding to make the world more vulnerable.
I've heard, it explains a lot.
It could.
He's totally capable of conceiving that thought.
In fact,
I don't know
how could he not have?
He probably has. So I don't know. I mean, it makes sense.
Look, I've got to tell you, when I offered that,
I feel like there's an Occam's razor violation here. On the other hand, I can't tell you what is a simpler explanation. So
no. Look, let me be perfectly clear. I don't think that's what he's doing. But the point is, when somebody has had the reaction to Rocco's basilisk that Yudkowsky has, and then the AGI era is upon us, and he is arguing for things that
will make us
seem to make matters worse, and doing everything in his power to persuade us that actually we must take these actions because the certainties are so high, that is at least consistent with the idea that he is in fact covering his own ass in light of the fact that he thinks the AI is about to be in charge, and it's going to view us differently based on what we've done in this moment.
I think
That
it's a
is,
meme worth existing. I think it's a meme worth existing.
well, it is. I think it is also just worth pointing out, hey, Eliezer, you've put these things on the table. If we put them together, they add up with the possibility that, let's say that you're not doing this, right? Just recognize that some arguments you have made very forcefully, when put together, create a third argument about what you yourself are doing in the present, which requires us to ignore you.
Well, for sure. But here's the what makes that argument, as plausible as it is, which is that, let's just accept for the purposes of this argument that probability of doom is where it is, or whatever. The question is, how do you know that your proposed remedy is going to make things better, right? Because, for somebody who demands, very rigorous proof, formal proof if possible, very detailed argumentation for, why AI risk is not that high or is lower or is very low or it can't happen or whatever, right? And some of his critics are just not very informed critics, right? And a lot of the arguments he gets are not very good arguments. I get it. Okay. Now, let's go on the other side of the ledger, right? He is advocating for, I don't even know if he would agree that he is advocating for it, but that's what he put out. If you read this essay at Time magazine, what did he suggest? He suggested a multi-country treaty. Let's say, I think the example countries he mentioned is the US and China, right? That would agree that they would perform a preemptive strike on Russia, on a non-signatory country. This is very important, right? So the treaty part is almost like a coalition of the willing. The treaty part doesn't really matter in this case. It is a bunch. We could say the 50 states of the United States got together and signed a treaty. Sure. The point is, there's a bunch of the world, right, that gets together and says, whoever else, we're not going to develop AI, but if you catch anybody else, we're coming for you, right? That is the plan that was put forth in the Time magazine essay. And the question is, so basically that requires, right, this sort of international atomic energy agency, whatever, I don't know the name, the IEAI, I think. Anyway, that sort of international monitoring body, right, to go everywhere and check everybody's, data centers and GPU production. And people have said, like, all GPU production should be tracked. People have suggested we stop, GPU production for 10 years, all sorts of crazy things. But like, the point is, if you build that centralized control authority, right, then you have that problem. And there's no way out of the problem.
Well,
and that's why I call it AI lockdown, right? It's the same idea, like stop the world, basically. Like is the vibe. But much like the lockdowns, where is the case? Like it's like we'll do that and it'll stop. It's like, okay, but why do you believe what you believe? This is a key rationalist question. Why do you think it will do that? Because I've got a lot of evidence for you, man, of like so many things that went the opposite. Not that didn't work. They went the opposite.
How could it possibly go right? Right, especially in a world with AGI. Without AGI, it still adds an extra single point of failure. Okay, with AGI, it's like throwing gasoline on the fire. And I must tell you, even hearing you describe what I had already, read in his Time magazine article, if you then take the, yes, tongue-in-cheek interpretation that he might be doing the AGI's evil bidding for his own reasons, and that's why he's advocating these things, which, again, it's not what I believe he's actually doing. I take him at his word, but I cannot put aside that if I take everything I know about his thought process, that it would make perfect sense for him to do this. But if you do that, then what you have just described is, maybe the AGI is going to want an Air Force. How are you going to get the AGI an Air Force? It's not easy because Air Forces are expensive, hard to come by. People who have them are not very likely to cough them up. Well, you need a rationale, and this would be it, right? You got to have airstrikes on server farms are the rationale for the AGI to get airplanes. So anyway, again, I'm not arguing that this is what he's doing. It could be. But what I'm arguing is that the fact that this is a rational interpretation of his behavior, of the reasons that he would make arguments that to some of us look preposterous, right? This would be an explanation for that. And the fact that it would be means either it's what he's doing, in which case we have an obligation to ignore it, or it's not what he's doing, and there's some large incorrect calculation, at least one of them, buried somewhere in this matrix of things that he has claimed are true.